Hey, Taurus sisters, it's Amy Kay. Welcome back to the podcast. In this episode, I'm going to encourage you to start a Sukkot where you live. I'm going to give you really practical advice, I guess, tips, helps, ideas to get you started. And before I go on, don't forget, if you don't have the Fall Feast issue of Taurus Sisters magazine, go get it. You can subscribe, and then if you don't want any other ones, just cancel afterwards. That's okay. But this Fall Feast issue has dozens of pictures of sukkahs. It has ideas for celebrating and worshiping the creator of the universe with Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot. I wrote an article in there, ways to say Shalomi during Sukkot. Sometimes, when you're with the same people for 8-9 days, it can be like you need to do some things. So I wrote down some things that can help you stay shalomi so that you can keep your focus where it should be. I also wrote an article in this issue about tips I've learned over the years for renting an RV. Some of you are like me, you live where it's cold. And a go-away Sukkot often involves renting an RV. And if that's something you've never done before, I have some very practical tips in this issue. And there's lots of other articles and clean recipes so go to TaurusSisters.com and subscribe to the magazine, and I will send you the Fall Feast issue if you subscribe before around like October 1st. All right, let's get into it. So the fall feasts are almost here, sisters. I'm so excited, and I know you are too. And I was in Texas last week with 200 women at the Surge Women's Conference, which was phenomenal. It was a really special time, and I was one of the speakers, and it's just so many great speakers, but really mostly amazing women to hang out with. I was very, very blessed. And one thing I hear a lot when I hang out with women from outside my circle here in Michigan is how many of you don't have a lot of people around you. There's so many people coming to Torah, but a lot of you are still kind of alone, or you don't know people very well. People are still coming, or you're really spread out, so it's hard to gather together. Maybe even every week it's hard to get together. And I feel for you because I do not have that problem here in Michigan. I'm very, very blessed here in Michigan. But I have a heart for bringing people together, and I can't run a Sukkot for all of you, but I can encourage you to start one. So before you say, "Oh, Amy, I can't do that. That's impossible," and you turn off this podcast, I encourage you to hear me out, especially, sisters, if you are in your heart and mind saying, "I wish there was a Sukkot here." Maybe you're the one who's supposed to do it. So before you say, "That's so impossible, I could never," I want you to just hear me out. Because if you're feeling like you wish there was one, but then the enemy, I'm just going to say what it is, the enemy says to you, "That's too hard, I'm not good enough to do it," I want to encourage you to try. And I'm going to give you some practical tips to make it easier so you don't have to completely invent the wheel. So let's get into this. Like I said, and I hear this a lot on the internet and from Taurus sisters and stuff, is people wish there was this, or they wish there was that. I wish there was a children's program. I wish there was a teen event. I wish there was. When you say that, when you feel that, sometimes it's the Father putting it in you to be the one to start it for the community, because you're probably not the only one who wants it. And sometimes I think we squish our abilities and squish our spiritual gifts and tell the Father, "That's too hard for you to use me in that." And I just want to remind you, the scriptures are full of the Father using ordinary people to do extraordinary things. And why not you? Why not you? And and let's just say what it is. Maybe you make an event once. If it's a total disaster, you don't have to do it again. But I encourage you to try. Just try once, because I think you're going to realize it wasn't as hard as you think. People are very, very, very grateful to you for having done it. And you're going to walk away very, very blessed, and then energized and more equipped and less nervous to do another event. But if it is a total disaster, a total dumpster fire of an event, you don't have to do it again. But I encourage you to try. And so as we look forward to the fall feast, I know there's 3 big feasts coming up. One is Yom Teruah. That's a one-day feast. You could have a party at nighttime to look at the moon and say, yay, the moon is here, the feasts are upon us. You could, you and your family could have a service the next day on the day of Yom Teruah. Yom Kippur, you don't have a party, but you could have a service, a convocation. And then, of course, the big one is Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles. It's an 8-day feast. And that is a feast that typically a lot of us will go away for. Now, none of us are doing these feasts correctly. We're all like practicing and trying and observing, and we're pursuing doing the feast. Because I know there's no temple, we can't take our offerings. We're not going to Jerusalem. It's like we go camping a couple hours away. That's not Jerusalem. But we're trying. We're marking the days and we're doing what we can. And Sukkot is a fun one because, well, we're commanded to have joy. It's the time of greatest joy according to Scripture. And it's called the Feast of Tabernacles or the Feast of Booths. It means live in a temporary dwelling, remembering that the Israelites lived in the wilderness temporarily, and that one day Yeshua is going to come back and dwell with us for 1,000 years, which is something to look forward to and has not yet been fulfilled in this very special fall feast of Sukkot. The last day of Sukkot is actually Shemini Atzeret, and it's the great 8th day, and that's a feast it's a one-day feast, and it looks forward to eternity, and that ought to be your biggest party of the year, your biggest convocation, a lot of worship, a lot of great food, and gathering together. But Sukkot and the 8th day, they kind of sandwich together because it's a feast of dwelling temporarily. A lot of us do go away together, and if you are in a position where you absolutely cannot do that, then disregard a lot of what I'm going to say, although I will say some things that will still apply to you who cannot actually travel or go away. And some of you who can't travel or go away, I know you might have a special needs child that just cannot do a change in the schedule like that, or you might be caring for elderly parents, or you yourself might have a physical disability that just really makes it too much to go away. I understand. But a lot of us who are able to, we do go away. And sisters, the friendships that me and my children have made, that my children and I have made at Sukkot are the cornerstone of my relationships here in Michigan. These are the people I've been Sukkoting with for years and years and years. And, sometimes I get asked to go speak at different Sukkots around the country. And I say no. I say no because my children have been growing up with these other children. Now they're all teenagers. And they've been doing Sukkot together for like 8 years. And I'm not going to stop that so much as I am able. So this is a really special time. You know how it is, sisters. You go to Sabbath fellowship and you have the service, you break bread, you chat a little, and before you know it, it's time to go home. And you're like, oh, but there were so many people I didn't even get to talk to. And it's so hard to, like, what I call work the whole room in one Shabbat, depending on how big your congregation is, I guess. But this Feast of Sukkot, where you go away and if you live together the way my group does, if you live together for that whole week, you have time. You have time to sit and fellowship with everyone. And so do the children and the teens. They have time to build these forever relationships. So this is why part of the reason it's so important to try to do a go-away Sukkot if possible. I feel like it's just part of the Father's plan while we're in exile and we're scattered to come together and live together for 8 days. So there's some perks to starting your own Sukkot. First of all, if people around you have done Sukkots in the past, it doesn't mean they have to do it every year. Usually a lot of those people have regular jobs, regular lives, and things happen in their lives, and they can't always be the ones to do it. So that's another reason that they might be very, very grateful if you start one. So don't worry about stepping on toes. Just ask questions. Go to them and say, what's happening, and is it helpful if I do one or whatever? And usually there's so many people starting to do Torah, some of these events start to get too big anyway, and you need to start breaking up into smaller Sukkots. in different parts of your county or different parts of your state or whatever. Another perk is, of course, then you can do things your way. So if you feel very strongly, if you have a strong conviction about how something ought to be done at a feast, you and your husband can start your own event. And I do encourage you to, when I say you all the time, but I encourage you, if you're married, do this with your husbands, or with other families or something. You can do it what I call your flavor of Torah. Whatever convictions are very, very important to you and weighty. And again, if you have 30 weighty convictions, then maybe none of them are weighty, but pick those ones that are really weighty. And if you need to make your own event to meet those convictions, then you can do that. Because when you are the host of your own event, you have the privilege of running it the way you think it ought to be run. Especially, and I'm mainly talking about those very weighty matters about Sukkot or worship and gathering and things like that. So just something to keep in mind, because when you go to someone else's event, they also have an obligation. The host, here's how I look at it. The host of an event, whether it's a Shabbat gathering, a Sukkot, a campfire, or a homeschool field trip, whoever is the host, that kind of means like the person in charge. They have an obligation to do it in the manner that the Father told them to do it. And so when we go to someone else's event, we can't make demands and say, well, my conviction is like this, and since I'm attending your event, you have to follow my conviction. It just cannot work like that, because everyone has different convictions. So one of the perks of being brave and starting your own event is that you and your children, if you have children, have an opportunity to have an event that's according to your convictions. And that can be a really wonderful thing. You can also then have it be on your calendar, the calendar that you observe, and you can just do things your way. So I'm talking too long. I'm trying to be brief here, but let's get into some really practical tips now on how to plan your own Sukkot. And this could be many, many podcasts. I'm going to just really breeze through this quickly and just give you the highlights. First of all, start praying. Start praying, because you can't plan this without the Father. You just can't. It will not go well. Secondly, ask questions. Everything hard that I have done in my life, it all started with asking questions. How do I go to nursing school when I'm 25 years old? I asked questions. I think I was 22 or 23. How do I start a magazine? I asked questions. How do I this? How do I that? Things that seem big and impossible. You guys know this. We all know this. You just ask questions. And sometimes it starts with the people around you. Who would want to come? Would anyone come? Is anyone interested? Things like that. Just ask questions. Have a notebook. Write down answers. Because don't try to remember everything. Because if you plan a Sukkot for several people, it's going to be a lot. So start taking notes. Next thing is just remember that you cannot please everyone. People will ask different things of you. Again, especially for weighty matters, follow the vision that the Father has given you for your Sukkot event. And I'm mainly talking about Sukkot, but this could be a Yom Teruah party or whatever. Follow the vision that the Father has given you for those weighty matters. If it's a small thing and you can accommodate someone's request, do it. But remember that you cannot please everybody. And just remind them of that. I wish I could meet, do what you want, but I can't please everyone in the situation. So we're going to do it this way. Another tip is to get wise counsel. Get other families. Maybe you want to be the ones running it, but at least have a council of other families or men who can give you advice and be a sounding board for you. There's wisdom in having lots of people help. This is a weird one, but I'm going to say something. Don't worry too much about money, and yet plan with money. So when I've talked to other people who start events or congregations or even who have like an actual building for their congregation, there's always a miracle story behind it. Always a miracle story behind how the Father provides for people who step out in faith and say, I'll start something. Man, it looks like it's going to cost $1,500. I don't have that money, but let's try. And as you walk in faith, the Father, I think He will probably provide. I can't promise you because I don't know you. You know, if you're doing this in a sinful, icky way, the Father's not going to honor that, of course. If you're doing it out of pride and arrogance, the Father's not going to honor that. But if you're doing this with the right heart and the right way, according to Scripture, I think He's going to provide the funds. But you have to start. I have found that He doesn't just show all His cards at once, so to speak. He's waiting for you to take steps. But I have seen His provision over and over in my own life and in hearing stories from other people who start events. So keep track, have a plan, but if things start to add up, don't give up. Just keep moving forward carefully. You don't want to be irresponsible. Don't sign a huge contract for tons and tons of money, maybe. Although some of you might feel led to do that. I shouldn't say don't do it. So you want to use wisdom, but you also don't want to put God in a box and say this is too much for Him, because you might be amazed. And then what a way to give Him glory. And then be a good steward of the money. Be careful how you spend money at your events. You know, don't spend money where you don't need to. Americans, we're really good at spending money. So as you plan this event, be careful how you spend your money. Don't waste it on frivolous, materialistic things, in my opinion. At the end, you can probably have some splurges. And now we are commanded to splurge. We're commanded to have the best meat. We're commanded to drink the best wine. So in those regards, yeah, we're supposed to splurge and things. But there might be other areas where you can save money. So just be a good steward. Follow Scripture most of all. Don't follow Amy. Follow Scripture. Test everything I say. Next is you want to decide maybe how many people you think might come or how many people you want to come. And that might depend on what kind of event you have. Some of you, if it's your first event or you just have a small congregation or you only fellowship with a couple families, you're just going to have a small Sukkot. And you don't have to invite everyone. You don't have to put it on Facebook. You can just invite the few families that you normally fellowship with. Others of you might feel called to put it on Facebook. You might have a location that can hold lots of people, and someone might have donated some money, and you can invite lots of people. Well, then do it. So decide on what kind of an event you're going to have, a small invite only or open to all. And that will depend on how the Spirit leads you, and also, of course, the size of the venue or the location where you plan to host your Sukkot. And that brings us to finding a location. Now, there are different ways to do Sukkot, and I can't really say that anyone is right, anyone is wrong. A lot of us go camping. It's just very Sukkot-y to a lot of us. But I don't think that's the only way to do Sukkot here in exile, because again, none of us are doing it right anyway. And that's another fun thing about the magazine. I have dozens of pictures of people in people's temporary dwellings, their sukkahs. And some people can't leave, and they set up, and it's freezing cold in Alaska, and they set up a fort in their living room and make a couch fort, like that's awesome. Or they might decorate their back porch and turn their back porch into like a sukkah, put lights up and make it pretty and special. There's different ways to do this. As far as having a go-away Sukkot, some locations to look at are possibly look at Christian camps that you can rent. And I will put a link in the description below. The American Camping Association has a database where you can search for camps that rent out their facilities. So maybe in the summertime, they're children's camps, but during the year, they rent out their buildings. And some of them might have a lodge, and a lodge with like 12 rooms and a little kitchen and a big living room. That could hold 12 families maybe. That can be a Sukkot. Some of them have a lot of room. Of course, you can also call campgrounds. Now, like here in Michigan, if we were calling campgrounds, I like to look at ones that have a meeting space or a clubhouse because it's cold in Michigan. Or possibly consider, can you rent a tent with heaters? Be creative. Think about, you can call YMCA camps and Boy Scout camps and retreat centers. There's all kinds of places. Some of them have campgrounds, some do not. So again, you're following the vision the Father gave you. Try to stick to that. Now, if the Father says, oh, here, you need to be flexible here. You've always done Sukkot this way. I'm going to have you do Sukkot this way this year. So, maybe the father is challenging you also, depending on what kind of locations are available. Now, for this year, you're really short notice. I'm recording this on August 20th, and Sukkot is like September 30th or something. You don't have a lot of time, so you might have to take what you can get at this point. But I still encourage you to plan a Sukkot. I still encourage you to try to get people together. You could, even if it's just a small group of families, do it in someone's backyard. I think they should check with their insurance company, and you might rent some porta-johns and then hand washing. You can rent like outdoor portable hand washing stations and things. I like a little cleanliness, but be creative. Think outside the box. I've even in the past called camp or fairgrounds. Think about fairgrounds in your county or the county next door. Sometimes they have a meeting space and campsites. It's not as glamorous as a campground maybe, but it can get the job done when you only have a month of notice to work with. If you can't go and stay at a location, maybe you can gather the people in your area at a meeting room. Maybe you can rent a pavilion at a park and just meet there every day. Then you all go back to your homes and sleep, but then you come back to that sukkah, that pavilion, every day together. So you're not actually doing boarding. You're just coming together, having a potluck and a service every day. That can still be wonderful. So think outside the box, especially with such short notice this year. Every year I do Sukkot is a little different than the year before. No Sukkots have ever been the same that I have done. And every year, every single year, my children and I say that was the best one ever. So don't be too stressed that it is not going to look like last year or that it doesn't look like Amy's. Just do something. My goal here is to encourage you to get people together, not to do it like Amy, but to get people together. If you rent a Christian camp, ask them, do you have rules? A lot of them don't allow alcohol. Some of them don't allow pets, things like that. So again, determine what's very important to you. But with short notice, you might have to take what you can get. And then you're going to find out how many people can sit together. And this, again, depends on what part of the country you're in. Sometimes I see videos online of Sukkots in like Texas and California, and they're all dancing outside, and the weather's beautiful, and they don't even have an indoor meeting space. And I'm like, oh man, in Michigan it always rains. Sometimes it snows. It's usually at least half the Sukkot is really, really cold. So we're always looking for a place with heat. A meeting room with heat. That's how we do Sukkot here. So it just depends on where you live as to what kind of facilities you require. But then you're going to find out, once you know where your worship time is, how many people can sit there and worship the Father together. And that might help you gauge what your Sukkot's going to look like. Some groups, they get a place where the facility lets them use a kitchen and maybe even a dining hall. If you have people staying in cabins that are like bunk room cabins, such as the summer campers sleep in, then you're probably going to need a kitchen, because those cabins, all they have is bunk rooms. They don't have any way to cook food. So if you're just getting bunk rooms, you're probably going to have to ask the camp if you can use their kitchen. Now, one tip that the people I fellowship with figured out a while ago is the camps almost always say no one else is allowed to use our kitchen. Well, some of us ladies went and we got what's called Serve Safe Food Manager certified. Not the one that the workers take at a restaurant, but the manager at the restaurant would take the manager course. And it costs a little money, and it definitely took a little time. But it's good for 5 years. And now a lot of these camps are like, oh, you have Serve Safe manager people? Yeah, as long as one of them's in the kitchen supervising, yeah, now you can use our kitchen. And some of these camps have the most glorious kitchens with like walk-in coolers and, 8-burner stoves and like amazing. So that's something to keep in mind. You do have time to go get Serve Safe certified if that helps you to use a kitchen. You can also get creative and use crock pots and hot plates and stuff, but still, like, where do you wash the dishes? Washing dishes in a bathroom, that's kind of gross. So, things to think about. If you have campsites and people have tents and RVs, well, then people are prepared they have their own kitchens. I remember growing up, we went tent camping all the time, and you learn to cook and wash dishes with your camping supplies. So just plan ahead of what kind of facilities you need based on what the sleeping accommodations are. Ask if you need insurance. If you rent a facility, sometimes you have to buy your own liability insurance. And then, like, who puts their name on that? I don't know. I don't know. That's up to you. But just look into insurance if you need it. And a lot of places will require you to sign a contract and put down a deposit. So if you rent a Christian camp or a YMCA camp or a Boy Scout camp, they're going to say, here's our rates. And first of all, sisters, oftentimes those rates are negotiable. Now, some camps make money from the food. Like with the place where I have my Torah Sisters retreat, they don't rent the buildings unless you get the food packages, which is maybe okay if it's not a Shabbat or a high day. Now, Shabbats and high days, I'm not going to go to a restaurant or let people at a camp serve me at all. But so that's something to take into consideration. Other places will rent just a bare building. But they often do require you to sign a contract to say, this is the bare minimum, because they're not going to save their space for someone usually unless you sign a contract, because they want to make money on that space during that week. And they have found that if they don't make people sign contracts and put down a deposit, people will flake out. So they will probably ask you to sign a contract, put down a deposit, and that contract, just, read every word, be very careful, and any extras that you want put in that you've asked for them, put it into the contract, so that then there's no questioning later. Oh, you said we could bring our pets. Well, it's not in the contract, so I guess I don't remember saying that. Well, that's a shame. Put it in the contract if you're going to work something special out. So that's my tips with signing contracts. And be really, really nice to all these places. They're working hard. Every place here in Michigan is still really short-staffed since COVID. And when you're renting their facility, as Torah keepers, the scripture says that when you borrow something, you give it back, and you give it back better. And certainly if you break something, you fix it, and you fix it better, you replace it better. And so as you work through these things with these people, you're borrowing their stuff, you're borrowing their facility, and we're going to treat them really well, and we're going to treat their facility really well. And in that way, we're loving our neighbors. So it can be a wonderful thing, and you might find a great place, even short notice. If a place has availability for Sukkot this year, they might be really willing to come down on their prices because if their facility is sitting vacant, they're going to be happy to have probably at least some money to fill it. So don't be afraid, again, to ask to negotiate the prices that they first give you. So that's a lot of tips on finding a facility. A little bit on programming. Just remember, I think that the men should be very involved in planning the teachings and the worship. If you're a single lady doing this, get some other men involved in at least that portion of it and let them lead and go with that. And of course, pick men who agree with you on the most weighty matters. And again, you can't get into quibbling about smaller, lesser matters, or you're going to have a miserable Sukkot. But get some men who agree on those weighty matters and get them to plan some teachings and things, and remind them, even with short notice, I think it's okay, but this is between all of you and the Father, you don't have to have a teaching every day. On high days, you're supposed to have, and Shabbat, you have a holy convocation for sure. The scriptures say this. And it doesn't always have to be a full, like a sermon. The men might not have time for that, especially with 2 other feasts coming up. It's okay, I think, to read the Torah portion and discuss it, or to read any portion of scripture out loud and then discuss it while you break bread, or to watch a video. We all know this. There's tons of teachings out there on all sorts of topics and portions, and probably from other Sukkot events that your men can push play. They can screen it beforehand, pick sound teachings, and you can watch teachings at your Sukkot this year, which is fine. It's actually a huge blessing that we have so much solid. And there's a lot of junk on the internet too, so be careful. But there's a lot of really great stuff on the internet, and you can use it. Same with worship. If you don't have anyone in your group who feels comfortable leading, singing, and playing a guitar or piano, you can watch worship videos. And don't worry too much about AV equipment. Sometimes we go crazy as Americans. We're like, we have to have projectors and everything has to be plugged in. I do think it's good for people to hear you, but you can only do what you can do. It's okay to print song sheets like it's 1985. Print song sheets and pass them out. Sometimes that actually allows for a lot more flexibility than, oh, we won't have that in the PowerPoint. I guess we can't sing that song. Even though the Spirit is telling us to sing that song, we don't have it loaded up. So song sheets allow for lots of flexibility. Or even a song book. Take your hymnal maybe even. So think outside the box. I think it's wonderful to break bread together every day at Sukkot, to try to have at least a potluck every day. Keep your potluck simple if you want. And sometimes you can break bread together and it's not even a potluck. If all these families have really special diet needs, which happens sometimes, then all the families can just bring their own food, but you bring it to the gathering place and you break your own breads together. That can be really special too. Sometimes the people I'm with, sometimes we have like what we would call a traditional Thanksgiving dinner. The ladies all plan who's going to get the turkeys, who's going to do the mashed potatoes, and we have a giant Thanksgiving dinner sometime in Sukkot. You can also, for programming, you could have some events for the children. You could have some events for the teenagers. I do encourage you overall for Sukkot, keep the programming simple. Don't overdo it. Don't pack your schedule super tight. Remember, the moms especially are busy at Sukkot. In a lot of ways, Sukkot is harder than being home, especially if the mom has small children. That long, I often have to go and find a laundromat. I have to do laundry halfway through Sukkot, so I'm gone for a whole afternoon. I often have to go do shopping. Sometimes, if you're camping and you have a cooler, you can only buy a little food at a time. You have to go find a Walmart or a Meijer every other day. There's lots, and you have to cook the food, you have to clean up, you have to take care of the kids. There's a lot for moms to do. And the men too. I know guys, but don't overprogram. And even the things that you do program, let them be optional. This is, especially for families, let those dads shepherd their own flocks. Don't make demands on them. Like, where were you? You didn't come to the third Bible study of the day. Where were you? Well, he might just want to be with his family. Some families will take off for a day. They will go do their own thing. They will go do their own sightseeing, their own field trip, their own family time. And that's okay too. Don't get offended by that. Let people have a lot of control over their own lives. And bear that in mind when you do programming. Not everyone is going to come to everything. Some people I like to stay up really late around the campfire talking, and then I sleep in. So morning early stuff, that's not my Sukkot jam. But every family's different. But I do recommend keep the programming light, especially with such short notice right now. And people just want to be together. They want to worship together, they want to break bread together, and they want to fellowship. And if you allow time for those three things, you have planned a fantastic Sukkot. And you don't have to plan anything else. Children can stay with their parents during services and during worship. Parents can bring busy bag stuff for their kids. You don't need to entertain people's children. You just don't have to do it. Keep it simple. You're going to be taking on a lot. You don't have to take on more than is necessary. Just plan a potluck time. Get some guys to plan some worship and some services, and lots of fellowship talking time, which is also known as free time. Just let the people do what they want. So again, here's my closing remarks, sisters. Be willing to do something different than what you've seen before. Sukkot looks different for different people, different places, different flavors, different years. It's never the same. So be willing to try something different, especially with short notice. If no one in your area is planning a Sukkot and you're like, oh, I'm reluctant, but I'll do it. Don't put pressure on yourself that it has to look like another group did it. Just do your best, and people are usually in person way nicer than you expect. They're going to be thankful for you. And that brings me to my second, I have 4 closing remarks. My second one is to be ready to be flexible. Plans will change. This is what the Father does. He changes our plans. Sometimes Satan changes our plans, sometimes just life. But as you make plans for Sukkot, be willing and ready to be, I call it bendy and flexible, because things are not going to go perfect. And it's okay. You just have to roll with the punches. Sometimes it rains and that ruins something, but be careful with that word ruin. It's ruined. My plan is ruined. Maybe God is putting your plan how He wants your plan. So be bendy and flexible as an event planner. My third thing I want to tell you is to ask for help and delegate. People, don't just assume people will ask if they want to help. You have to, I think, usually invite people to participate in helping. And if you know people well who are coming, you might say, can you be, like, you don't have to plan the potlucks. Can you be in charge of making sure the tables and chairs are set up for potlucks and cleaning it up? And even that lady doesn't have to do it every day, but she can find different volunteers to do that every day. When the groups I go with, we have a chore sign up, and everybody signs up for chores. And different people clean the bathrooms every day. Different people take out the trash every day. The planner does not do everything, or they will not have a very nice Sukkot. So, and you need to have a nice Sukkot too. You need to be free to worship. Sukkot is about worship. So ask for help. Invite people to help. People like to help, especially an event like this. They want to participate. They know that you're to volunteer. They know it's not like anybody's getting paid to put on these events, right? They want to help, but they also might not want to step on toes. So they're going to be shy and polite. You have to ask. Some people will say, let me know what I can do. People don't say that unless they mean it. And I've had people tell me no. There was a few people, I said, I thought you would be good at this. Can you do this volunteer thing? And they said, actually, that's not my jam. I don't want to do that. And I was like, I'm so glad you told me that. So people will say no sometimes. And then you can see if there's a different place to plug them in. And some people are going through a lot in their lives and maybe they don't want to help at all. That's okay. Usually there's plenty of people, but sister, do not do this by yourself, or you and your husband don't do this by yourselves. And finally, when you have those volunteers, don't micromanage them. At my retreat, I had lots of volunteers helping me, and I probably still micromanaged them too much. I'm working on this. See, I talk about things I'm working on. But when I really stepped back a few times and I just said, you know what? You guys set this up how you want to set it up. They did it in ways that I never even had thought of. And they did it so well. And sometimes they did it in ways that I'm like, I would never do it like that. But you know what? It worked out and I didn't have to do it. And it was great. So when people do volunteer to help, don't micromanage them. Do stick to your vision. Make people ask you about big decisions that might affect weighty matters of conviction for you. But sisters, that's all I have. I just really encourage you. It's not too late to plan a Sukkot. Find a campground. Find a state park campground. If you live in a warm weather, even if you live in a cold weather area, you can all go camping. Just some families go camping together. Maybe you don't have a meeting space, but you gather your camp chairs around someone's campfire each night, and you read the word together, and you sing songs around the campfire. Maybe there's not even a guitar. Maybe there's nothing. People have been doing Sukkot for centuries without all the fancy stuff that we have. Guitars used to be really expensive. No one had guitars. No one had sound equipment. There was a time people didn't even have the scriptures in their laps. They quoted and they remembered and they said what they remembered. We have scriptures in our laps. We have scriptures on our phone. We can do Sukkot. We can do it lots of different ways. So I encourage you, get people together for Sukkot. If no one's planning it, maybe you should do it. And then go get Torah Sisters magazine. There's lots of great ideas in there for you, especially also if you're staying at home. There's ideas in there for those of you who have to stay home too. So I love you, sisters. Happy feast season. I will see you in the next episode.